on terror, Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. Senator Paul, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Good to be with you.
Is there sufficient sentiment amongst your colleagues, Republican colleagues in the Senate, that the defense budget has to be cut along with entitlement reform, along with the other items on which the president wants to spend money? Or do you think that most of your colleagues view the defense budget as a sacred cow that cannot be touched?
I think there's beginning to be a door opened up where conservatives are coming around to understand that if we are serious about balancing the budget, that we will have to look at the military. I repeat over and over again to them that every dollar spent is not sacred and every dollar spent is not well spent. One of the things I've been talking about recently, is that the Pentagon says they're too big to be audited. And I think that's particularly galling. And I think when crowds hear that, crowds of Republicans and conservatives, they're nodding their heads and saying,
right,
you know what, we do have to look at military spending also.
Do we need 900 permanent military installations around the world? I can't imagine that any one human being could even name or know where all these 900 are.
Well, I tell people I think there are two extremes. One extreme would be that we're nowhere anytime, and the other extreme is that we're everywhere all of the time. I think we're pretty close to the extreme where we're everywhere all of the time. We can't afford it. It's counterproductive. And I think we need to seriously look at where we are and what we can afford to do around the world.
Do you think that the killing of Osama bin Laden will create some sort of aura of good feeling whereby it will be easier for the president and the Congress to get the votes to raise the debt ceiling? Or do you think that members of Congress can separate the president as commander-in-chief from the president as borrower-in-chief?
I don't really see the issues as particularly related, really. The death of bin Laden, I think, is being celebrated, and really rightfully so. I hope it gives a certain finality to things that have been going on, and that we have, eliminated the person who is at the head of these things. But what I would say as far as connecting those things to the debt ceiling, I don't think there's necessarily a connection. I think the debt ceiling, many of the Republicans are now going to vote against it. More will vote against it than voted against the spending plans. And we'll see what happens, but I'm not sure exactly where the count will be.
Are there any reasonable, likely, foreseeable circumstances under which you, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, will vote in favor of raising the debt ceiling?
I can't imagine voting for it. The only way I could vote for it is if we passed a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, if we enacted a realistic plan to balance the budget within a certain period of years, 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, but within a finite period of time, and we amended the Constitution, and they said to me, one more time, we want to borrow one more time, then I could do it. But what's going to happen is they're going to come to us and they're going to say, we need $1 trillion, but you know what? It'll be gone by November.
Right.
I cannot in good conscience give this government more money because they're not spending what we have wisely.
Now, why can't the Republican leadership in the House understand what you just said and use this as a golden opportunity to stop the borrowing once and for all? Because if they do that, it never even makes its way to the Senate. Harry Reid will never be able to put that on the floor of the Senate if the House simply says no.
I think they understand it, but they are concerned about default. I'm also concerned about default, but what I tell people is we can pay the interest on the debt to the people who have loaned us money. We pay that interest out of the proceeds, out of revenue. We bring in $200 billion a month. There's no reason to default, but there's also no reason to borrow more money. Make your interest payments on revenue that comes in. If the leadership would take that approach, then we could really put pressure on the Democrats to really have budgetary reform. But you have to be willing to say, no, I will not raise the debt ceiling. I don't think all of our leadership is there yet.
Got it. Senator Rand Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, Senator